a murky, forgotten land.
All people come here for the same reason.
A couple of quick thoughts on Dark Souls 2, without a doubt the ugly stepchild of the Dark Souls trilogy. I think there are a few good things about this game. Visually, I think it's very stunning. I think the level visuals are designed very well. If not the level design, I think the level design is often very simple, though there are some standouts like Drangleic Castle is a lot of fun. The Iron Keep is cool, if very simple. I think that the game is very large. There are a lot of enemies, or bosses I should say, meaning a lot of souls, a lot of stats, so you can really create a decently high level build. You can invest a lot of different stats, and you get a lot of boss souls that you can transpose into very cool weapons like the Smelter Sword. Lots of great options. So I did really feel like I had kind of an Elden Ring like build here, where I had a lot of options that I could, choose different weapons to bring to bear on different enemies, and that was a lot of fun. I went with a strength build here for obvious reasons. Next, I think the storyline is probably the most interesting in the Dark Souls series. I think that it's very, a lot more straightforward than number one, or maybe number three is a little more straightforward, but it's a lot less opaque. I think that the side quests are very interesting and not as difficult to complete. I found myself completing most of the side quests without too much trouble, and that was pretty gratifying. I actually kind of liked what felt like a more straightforward Souls game. The negative of having so many bosses in a game that isn't as complex as Elden Ring is the bosses are, for the most part, just very mid, very boring. A lot of them have maybe just like 3 moves. And so up until the end game in the DLC, I first tried like 90% of bosses, and so I didn't really sink my teeth into any of them. But I also don't feel like I really need to, or that it would really be that rewarding to, because most of them, even some of my favorites among the early game bosses like the Pursuer, which by the way shows up like 10 more times, are just very simple. They have like 3 moves. Once you got used to the stamina consumption, which is very high in this game, and you kind of learn from the Pursuer and maybe a few other bosses that strafing is really the goal in this game. As many attacks as you can strafe rather than roll makes a huge difference. It really paid off against later game bosses like the Dark Lurker. Once you figure that out, a lot of these bosses are just not very rewarding to fight, and I wouldn't look forward to fighting most of them again. With very few exceptions, literally maybe 2 or 3 exceptions, I think that I get kind of the hate for Dark Souls 2. I really like the build variety and the size of the game, and that you can have a ton of different weapons that you max out and bring to bear against all your different enemies, but I really dislike that the bosses are so boring. With maybe 3 exceptions that I can think of, none of them are bosses that I look forward to fighting again. I do think Sir Alan is goated. I think the Burnt Ivory King is very cool. I think for some reason, I don't know why they were so obsessed with mobs and duos in this game. There are so many mobs. There are rat mobs, there are like congregation mobs, there are skeleton mobs, and they all have boss health bars. It's just not fun. It's not a fun way to fight. They'll just plop 2 enemies, with decent movesets, maybe 3 or 4 moves, and just have them fight you at the same time. I think the Belfry Gargoyles in Dark Souls 2 is the worst boss fight I've ever experienced in a Souls game. It wasn't like insanely hard or anything. It was just so entirely unfun to avoid all their attacks and try to get enough damage in. And it kind of is, Belfry Gargoyles I think is the worst example, but is the exaggerated version of what is typical in this game, which is just there's a lot of enemies that just have a shared health bar, and that sucks. That's not how I enjoy. Those aren't the kind of boss fights I enjoy, and that was most of this game, unfortunately. So I don't think that the highs, which will be the boss fights I highlight just in full later, after I stop talking, which will be very soon, don't worry. I don't think the highs of this game really make up for the lows in terms of the bosses, because I am also very boss focused in these games. This is why I play the games, so I don't see myself playing Dark Souls 2 much more, or if I do, I'm gonna skip like most of the optional bosses. And to the game's credit, most of the bad bosses are optional, though a few of them are not. And so I think that's frustrating. But in any case, the positives of the game, again, it looks very visually stunning. It's a bit more straightforward than some of the other games, more straightforward even than like Bloodborne or something. And the weapon and build variety is cool. The number of souls you get so you can really level up your character is cool. Little bit of jankiness in hitboxes and in lack of iframes when you're doing things like entering a fog gate or traveling in an elevator or whatever, where your character can't move or otherwise evade damage. But otherwise, you know, decent game. Worth it if you're really obsessed with the Souls franchise. If not, perfectly skippable. I don't think anybody would be mad at you for skipping this game. Okay, anyway, gonna just let the footage roll of some of my favorite boss fights. Almost none of these, none of these took me one try. Most of them took me like closer to 10 tries, and a few of them took me a ton. But, you know, they were enjoyable. There are a few gems in this game, without a doubt. So, here they are.